sure things are working. Cool, they appear to be. Hi guys and welcome. Just give me 1 sec. I wanted to get started. This is Tony Leonard sitting in for Zbrush Live on this Saturday, May 20. Or actually, sorry, is it May? Is it not? It's not May. It's April 25th. Sorry about that. Just out of my mind today. I hope everybody's doing safe. Give me just one moment and I'll get started. Let me know if you can hear me okay, and I'll get started momentarily. Alright, I'm just gonna get things set here and we shall begin with no delay. So last time around I was speaking on a few things like using Unreal and using how I go from ZBrush and extend into some other applications like Blender, Substance, Quixel Suite, baking, and also integrating Mixamo into my workflow so that I can come up with some creative characters that I can put into the Unreal Engine environment. So today I wanted to kind of go through and talk about a few characters that I've been working on in the meantime since last stream. And I've done a few characters since then, but I'll try to bring some of them up and talk about sculpting them, as well as bringing them to light here in the Marmoset engine, and then integrating Mixamo, and then also sometimes using not just those two other apps on the top of ZBrush, but how to do a few bakes that you can do outside of ZBrush, bring them all into a renderer and either get something that you can make move, or you can use it for the pose or what have you. So I know some have been hungry for this information, so I'll try to go through it and explain as much best that I can. So what you're looking here on my screen is something that I came up with. I have purchased a few female base meshes, from a great artist named Eugene Faucon, who I believe is French-Canadian, perhaps. I believe he works up in Montreal. And he had some wonderful scans of young females that he stylized, sort of almost like in a fashion sense. And I took one of them and I sculpted over it, did a few props, did the shoes, baked it out, redesigned the hair so that the hair would just be, rather than a hair system, just a sort of more static hair sculpt. But I want to keep things simple so that I can kind of carry the concept over into Unreal Engine, right? And so, sort of as a portal for things, what I usually do in my own workflow for this project that I've been working on is that I do all of my base sculpts for characters in ZBrush and create what's called a high and a low mesh. And so for those that are unfamiliar with doing bakes or anything of the sort, generally to texture map any of these models, I use the lower topology that looks a little bit more like this, except for the fact that since I've imported it into the render, you can see that there are triangles in between all of the quads. So it actually just places, it converts it, I guess maybe when you save things out as an FBX, they might get triangulated, and then that's how it views inside of Marmoset, right? And the same might be also for a lot of other renderers. Sometimes when you bring things into Unreal. I think it might have the chance of probably having some triangulation happening, even though it's a quad model, right? And because it's quad, it holds all of the same, UVs as, I cut out when I started dealing with some, a model in quads. So just as a preview, I put this one together and kind of comped it inside of Marmoset. And this is how I kind of use Marmoset as a test bed for texturing and lighting, so that I can look at a model, and I have to say in advance, this person or this character is a cyborg, and therefore that's why the cut grooves are sort of along the body. You'll have to forgive the nudity a little bit, but I hope that we're all mature to handle art. And so, you set up the lighting. I have actually what's called a sky, which is based off of an HDRI, and as soon as I've drawn out all of these little hot points from the directional lights that are in the HDRI image, basically I've changed the color by just, selecting the light, like you can do here, and then, I can change the color of the light to something that's a little bit more desired. But once I've come up with a lighting scenario, it's great to look at this and just as a proofing measure, right? But in the final end, what I want to get across to everyone that's watching today is you can take your sculpts from ZBrush, and with just a little bit of optimization, you can get them to move. And so this is just a test, having taken some of these models and run them through Mixamo, and I want to kind of be able to show you guys how to get there. And so you can take this model and kind of build sort of like a comp scenario, put some movements on it, and it's great to see concept art, like if you do a character design, being able to see it a little bit in motion. This one, actually, the sword hadn't been parented with the object yet, and so that's why it's not moving. But let's say, for example, I'm going to stop this. Might be a little choppy because of the feed in playback, and unfortunately, probably because my GPU is going nuts, streaming to everybody. Playback might be a little bit choppy on that one, so you must forgive me. But there are walk cycles and just a few poses that I've paired with this model. And the way that I did that was exporting two different meshes. One is being a high and a low. And so I want to go back to ZBrush for just a moment. Here we are, and I'll open up this one. I believe is my final, and we'll take a look at it. So this is the character in the ZBrush environment, and as you can see, I did a lot of poly painting on this one, and so there are colors that are in the color space, and then I think I chose a skin shade just for the material base, right? Sometimes it'll write the material out and show pretty well, so if I had something different like basic material, some of the colors might be a little different or exaggerated by the time it gets to Marmoset. But I just, for viewing purposes, I pretty much just use a skin shade. Let me bump these up so that you can see it in detail. So basically what you're looking at here, if I was to hit polygroups and I select the body, is a base mesh, right? And it has pretty good topology. There are some areas, unfortunately, when I go into Mixamo, for those that are a little bit more novice at this, you may want to do a considerable amount of weight painting. That way you get less deformations, like under the arms or between the legs. That's something actually I'm working on learning to do myself. But pretty much if you do some weight painting, what it is it's actually a system of giving a certain firmness or flexibility to the model by painting on the weights literally on the topology. And I would give it a Google and look it up. It's a little involved, but it's something that's necessary to do. And I'll say that because if you look at some of the movements here, and I'm still working through some of these, proofing some of these myself, if I take the timeline and I slide it along, you might see certain areas where it pulls at the mesh, like especially here under the crotch, and maybe some instances under the wing it might pull it a little bit strange, especially if you were to pose this in a T-pose, which is something I'm going to get to pretty shortly here. But I came up with a range of poses based off of this mesh. So this topology and what you see in render is pretty much the same. However, all of the high details, and I'll actually just flip this up just a bit, open the geometry tab, and I'll slide this all either to this for the subtool, and as you can see the poly paint clears up. If I take and hit Shift F and getting rid of the poly frames, you can see that the body, you know, displays in the viewport a little bit crisper, right? And so what I've done here is just, you know, gone through and done like a simple poly paint job, adding, you know, all of the flesh tones and accents, masked by cavity, for some that might be unfamiliar. Once you have like your details in, you can always use masking in various ways to come in and do some effects like masking off the skin and just, you know, sort of erasing out like the cuts there, so that I can go along with an airbrush and just sort of tap some darker flesh tones to give some divisions to those design patterns in the skin, right? In the same way, for those who've probably watched quite a few other ZBrush videos, I'll point out that I use the feature of the spotlight to paint the tattoo on the back and in the front by just using like a bit of sourced art for a tattoo, and looks nice on the character. And so this will be basically sort of just like the base color texture that I'll use, but we can use all of these poly paints in our texturing job, and so that's part of what I would like to show everyone today. So I'm gonna just take this model and kind of show you how we would save it out. So one is you want to have a mesh that is probably merged. So from this base, I think this was my working model where I keep all of the subtools. If I was to increase the count here, you can see the number of tools that I have between highs and lows. And so if I flip through, usually in a file, I'll put something like an appended 3D star, just only for naming purposes. So that's what you see here. And then I'll move and do the low, and that low will have subdivision levels maybe. But I'll also copy another instance of the subtool so that I can actually, you know, convert it to a high and sculpt up high details. And basically that will be what I'm baking off of. So once I have either a high and low, I'll save those as a merged, and then, you know, like say for example, these are the boots that came on separately, sculpted them, you know, using Dynamesh, I believe, and also Z Modeler, just to create like a wrapped tube. I think I took the curved tube brush and then into the caps and cut it off, and then just used the basic topology to sort of form it around the foot and create a sock, and then welded it sort of to the sculpt that is the shoe. And these I just did in Dynamesh really quick. If I was to flip them over, you can see they've been Z-remeshed, and then I believe I just went and probably took a select rectangle or something like that, select half of it, and then give it a different poly group just so that I can split a nice cut for the UVs. When doing UVs, I have sometimes used the Zbrush Uv Uv Master, and I use it sparingly. Sometimes I'll do either quick UVs on stuff just to get it out of the way, or I'll use it to create a shell and then take it someplace else like Rism, where I can do some very specific cutting if it has the supporting geometry for it. But this one, there's a lot of tight, geo, just to keep some of the detail of the shoe. I wasn't really concerned with poly count so much, so I just kind of Z-remeshed it and then unwrapped it and then placed it with the other model. So it's kind of confusing to look at, but like you take your low and then you save this out, and then I would take a duplicate of this model that is just high, and then I would bake that out. And the way that I do it is you could make all of those things out in ZBrush. Oh, hey! Already getting some contents. Hey, sorry guys, I missed the comments just for a second. Can you see me, hear me okay? Oh, you can only see my title screen. I'm so sorry. Here we go. Sorry about that. Thought I had clicked it. It was buried under another window. There we go. I'm so sorry. So let me start again. Hi, I'm Tony Leonard. This is Saturday afternoon, April 25th, Thank you for joining me. I hope all of you are safe from Corona, keeping in, and are doing well. So I just wanted to go over a couple of things. I'm going to jump and just, now that you guys can see, kind of re-explain what I'm going to be going through. So I have a model that I've been working on. Hey, how's it going, Pro? And I've just simply poly painted it, but I wanted to kind of go through how I created a high and a low for a comparison bank, right? And a lot of times when I do a comparison bank of characters like this, in fact, since my screen was up, I kind of probably glossed over this. So here in the Marmoset, this is exactly what I was describing in Marmoset. Unfortunately, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. That's embarrassing. But let's move on. All right. So the character that I've done here over probably like the last week is something that I've been working on, and it's sort of like a cyborg character that will fit into the world that I last showed and presented in my last stream. And this one here, I originally sculpted it up from a base mesh by Eugene Foken, I believe is his name. You can look him up on ArtStation. He's a great artist, but he sells some of his female base meshes, and I bought one. And one of them actually came, curiously enough, with using layers. For those that have never really used them inside of ZBrush, when you have morph targets or layers, you can sort of change proportionally some aspects of a model at times if you save the layers out, right? So you can kind of inflate the figure. You can maybe sort of dial in, the shoulder, hip, and breast size, that sort of thing, right? So I went through and created a sort of base mesh that was slightly altered, painted it over, sculpted a bit on top of it, poly painted it, cut some of the more sort of like cyberpunky, doodads in the face, just some points of interest so that we can make this visually interesting, and then took it through Quixel Suite, and just basically sort of used the simple bake already with just a light material for some of the flesh color. So some of these things I can kind of just paint in and use some of the color IDs, and then create like different materials or different visual material points, just like you guys probably saw me do in about, I think it was one stream before this. But moving right along, a lot of these have been ported over to Mixamo, where I'm coming up with animations. And I kind of wanted to talk about, I've been wanting to talk more about Mixamo since, I've been thinking to do some more like character or human character type characters rather than hard surface, to sort of present in the same world that I was showing last time in Unreal. And a lot of times before Unreal, I use Marmoset again as a sort of staging area. And so if I play these, all of these have poses and movement. Unfortunately, this last one, I had not yet parented the sword to the hand, so that's why it's static. It's not actually joined to the rig or the bones. And so, she turns around and the sword is still there. But if just for positioning and sort of getting an ideal look and feel, I think I placed it only at the first frame. But you can get all of these saved out, and these animations along with these are FBX animations that have been run through Mixamo, and so I want to show you guys kind of my process for bringing things over to there. So first, I'm going to go back and look at this one more time, and two. I'm gonna come up here, and just to show you what the subtools look like, starting from the top again, I have a star here that's just appended, but this is just for the naming sake, and then I have high and low meshes in here. So pretty much I've used this as a template, right? And the parts that exist would be like the hair piece is like here, I'll turn on dynamic solo. And the hair piece is just sculpted up from Dynamesh, and then I think I took only the edge on the outside and just poly grouped it and cut it out to just make sort of a perfect hair helmet that I could position in, and then Z-remeshed it. A lot of times, just as a clue, a lot of times you can take where was it? I believe down in edge loops it was. You can take a poly grouped area just by masking it. Like say for example, if you hold down Control and you mask an area, right? And if you hit W, that would become a new poly group, right? So in that regard, I just masked out the bottom of the inside of the hair helmet, polygrouped it, and then hit it and delete hidden, and then Z-remeshed this area after I did a edge loop on the outside of it. In fact, I think it's a edge looped mask border or either group loops. Kind of do the same thing. It'll just kind of make a firm edge around the inside lip of this so that I could either Z-remesh it and then subdivide it, and it would still hold shape along its edges to create the helmet, right? I think even for this little bit, I just brought a strand of hair out by using a snake hook, and then after the Z-remesh, it just, the topology fell together, right? So that's just one simple part, kind of adding in, sculpted up the body. There's about 7 subdivision levels, I believe, on this. And this is just sort of a base paint. So what I do is I create a low, and then the high actually has all of the same color information. And then I don't save really that much color information in the low because it's going to basically just be baked, right? So just for example, I like to bake a lot of things in Nald. It's a little bit of an older software. Like you could always use just about any other baker, including the baking tools inside of ZBrush, but just to show you what I'm doing here, it's pretty straightforward. So I'm going to hold Control B and bring in my sculpts, and if I look at this right, I'll have to remember the names of the actual models then when I save them out, so I can do another one of these. But let's see here. I think I had a... yes, we had a high, and that's an FBX. So that FBX, I want to talk about this for a second. So if I go back to ZBrush, when I save out characters like this for baking, a lot of times the decimated high that I'll duplicate, so in other words, generally like I'll make sure to do a merge visible with only the subtools that are high for the high model. I'll save those out decimated, right? But I'll do a merge visible and decimate it, and then once all of those parts are decimated clean enough, I'll save the high with the color information turned on. So you want to make sure that each of your subtool that has poly paint information, you want to keep it on. And the reason why I save it as an FBX is because if you save it that way, it'll keep the color information in the vertex space, right? So like for example, I'm gonna hit FBX, visible, bin. Bin is the type of FBX I believe that will hold embedded information like color space, and also smooth normals, which will smooth out the mesh a little bit, even if it has just like, you know, high detail in it, but it'll just make all the normals just all the nice and more and crisper, right? Which is what we want. It might take, in some instances, depending on your poly count, you know, even decimated, if it's a lot, sometimes it might take a second to save it, but eventually it will, and then in a small dialog box it'll say FBX exported, right? But I would wait for it to complete when you save it out. When it does, you bring it here and bring it in as the high, and I've labeled it so the FBX is a high FBX, and then now we need to go search for our low. So I'm just going to bring that in, and that will be the comparison. Everything that is high will get baked to the lower mesh, right? And it'll generate maps for it. I've already UV'd this model. Probably not the best of UVs. I could probably take them into RISM and be a little bit more exact, especially around the areas between the legs or wherever I have them polygrouped. But I will leave that up to you. I actually came in the ZBrush plugin and did the same. It already had polygroups on it, so I just did an unwrap by polygroup. Gonna have to watch the rest tomorrow. Euro bedtime. Well, thank you for watching. I appreciate that. And again, if anybody do catch me if you have a chance to ask questions. I am slightly trying to keep one eye on the comments there, so that I can answer any questions. But let me know, because I know I will tend to ramble a few things off and might get lost in the sauce. So please do stop me if there was something that you wanted to ask. So anyway, in the UV Master, which I'll open up, if I choose polygroup and then do unwrap, all of the polygroups that are associated with this model, like let's say for example I click here and do this, all of the pre-established polygroups will get cut, and even there along the buttocks there, it has like a small strip. It will cut and flatten those areas, and perform like an unwrap. I've already done it to this, so I'm just going to take this and flatten just to see. But this one has subdivision. But I did copy the already UVs to the lower, so I think I have actually yet another copy of the low that has been unwrapped, knowing that this would be the case. So basically, we'll just say, for example, this would be low, because I'll drop everything down and I'll save just this. Not as an FBX, but the high I'll save as an FBX, and the low I'll actually save as an OBJ, right? But just to give you an example, you can always look at your UVs unwrapped. If you unwrap them by polygroup and then flatten, it will display them splayed out so that you can see and edit them, right? Sometimes you might want to relax them, or hit them with the smooth so that the vertexes are not so hard, or something like that. Anyway, so low and high, right? Let's go back over to Nulled really quick. I'm just going to use this tool very quickly to get, low and high loaded up. Apose low. I think that should be it. And I would open this, and then I would select my size of maps. So basic, fair game res would probably be 2048, right? As a general practice, I try to go about 4K, so I'm going to switch that to 4096. I'll take it with the aliasing, that's fine. And then I'm not going to push the cage or anything, I'm just going to bake it as is. But I do want to add maps, right? So all of the maps that I want it to bake off of, basically, sort of like a basic set. So like if I go to Substance Designer, or if I go to Quixel Suite, or even Mixer, I want to have these basic sets of bakes, of just like a procedural bakes, so that I can begin doing all the cool stuff with materials and textures and curvature map and edgeware. But before that, I need to bake all of the basic stuff. So I'm going to bake a height. I'm going to tell it to give it a tangent space normal, object space normal. I'm going to skip derivative and go to Ambient Occlusion. I'm going to skip transmission. I'm going to go to Vertex Colors, and this is very important because if you had color IDs, like you have certain sections of a model that require specific material information, you could use Vertex Colors, put in, and I think I've showed you guys this before. In fact, I learned the trick from Joseph Drust, and I had never really seen it in ZBrush to know, but yes, color IDs can be done in a snap. But in my case, I've poly painted on it, but I'm going to use the Vertex Colors anyways, because I'm going to use it as a sort of an albedo diffuse map, right? So I'll add it. Cavity maps really don't need for PBR, so I'm not going to bake one. Curvature, yes. And sometimes when you have specific materials on top of that, you can use the material ID color. But usually that works when you have specific materials, like say in another 3D package, say Blender or Maya or Max, you may come up with a base shader that you put on your model, and then that model will have texture information and or maybe material information, and then you put a texture on top of that and things look great, right? But first things first. So I think that should probably be good, but I don't need an ID map, and I don't need bent or tangent space bent normals, right? At better, I would probably need a thickness and a position map, but I can always go back and bake those inside of Substance if I really need them, right? So I'm going to hit pre-process here. I'm thinking that probably both of these might be the source meshes that I used in the first place. So it takes a couple of seconds to bake out, and then basically what it's going to do is it's going to bake them, but I need to export and save them. Right? So you give it a few minutes. 4096, it might be a little bit high. You don't always need to use 4096. You can always use 2K maps if you'd like. They're lighter, they're a little bit easier and faster to bake out depending on your GPU, but you can upscale elsewhere, right? So if I bake 2K maps and I get to Substance and or Quixel, I can switch that to a higher resolution with more detail and bake on those maps. So we're just going to give this one just a second to finish up, and we'll see what they look like. In the meantime, any questions? I'm paused and I'm paying attention to you guys to see what the comments are. Almost there. Almost there. 84%. This is the hard part about streaming and baking at the same time. It always takes a second longer than it usually does. Oh well. In the meantime, again, also, I do hope that everyone is staying safe. Craziness in the world, but do stay in. And if you have already run into the illness, I hope that you come through positive on the other side, and wish everyone good health. So, almost there, 93%. 95 and 96. There we go. Oh, I think this was actually a wrong one. Sorry. Let's see. Yeah. Actually, I'm gonna stop this. Pretty much this would be the way that I would do it, and I think I actually chose two meshes that were different meshes by accident. I did that. I did. I probably forgot what I named it, and you picked the wrong mesh. I'm so sorry. But pretty much this is the method that I would use. So, as you notice, basically what it did was it projected the UV space that's wrong from one mesh to another. I'm going to have to try this again under better circumstances. I'm so sorry. But pretty much what it did was it projected from one mesh that is exactly the same in the same space, like the same transform space, onto another. The unfortunate part is I accidentally picked one mesh where the UV space is probably different. In fact, as you know, our final mesh would have all of the hair and everything attached. I probably picked the wrong mesh. I'm sorry about that. But pretty much that's how it would bake. And then what I would do is I would come along and take all of these maps, probably go to main, figure out my export name and path, and it would save all of the maps and bring them out. Actually, you know what? I want to try this again. But we'll try it from a different space and actually make this more interesting. So I'm going to open up Substance, see if I can do it there really quick, and you would probably see the same thing. And for those that are curious, maybe we can explore this together, because it's usually pretty much a snap to do baking like this. I just accidentally picked the wrong meshes. Sorry. I go through so many iterations to come up with finals sometimes that I forget what I renamed or what the source meshes were. So I'm not going to do that. I'm going to close this. Okay, so now we have Substance open. I'm going to jump over here, and let's say again we're back to our scenario where we're going to set up a bake. To do the same thing, in fact, actually this is good. Maybe this is a good thing that I came over to Substance so that everybody knows. But to do a simple bake, you just hit New under File, and I'm going to go select the actual mesh, this time maybe the low. And actually, I know where I have a correct one. Let's see here. There was a previous bake in here. Yes. And in here, I did save Final Authority OBJ. Actually, let's go back to the other one. Actually, let's select the other Final 001. That's one that doesn't have any accessories on it. It's just the basic bake. It's easy to look at. And we'll do 2048, right? I will set this up using OpenGL, sorry. Compute tangent space per fragment. I'll leave that checked. And I'm not really working with UDIMs, so I'm not going to check the create texture set per UDIM tile, but sometimes it is handy to use this if you're using UDIMs on your model. And then also I could add extra maps, but in this case, because I've already baked it out, I'm going to leave this blank and bake a new set, right? So I'll hit OK and cross my fingers. Right, there we go. That's the low, right? So as you can see, without any baked information on it, make some tea while baking. That's an awesome idea. So I have the low mesh here, and nothing has been baked, right? There are no maps on this. I haven't generated any maps or baked anything yet. But I can actually bring in some of the maps that I've already baked, right? If I have the high, what I can do is I could just come in, bake mesh maps, and that's under the texture set settings. There's a small button here that says bake mesh maps. It will bring up the baking panel, and then I can up-res if I'd like. So let's say from 2048, I'm going to go, 4096, and get those source maps higher than they originally were. I could do that. I can also use low poly as high, but in this case, I want to go find a high. So this is where I suppose I should go find the high mesh. So let's see. It'll be named high. No, that's the flats. Probably up here. And probably one of the high. Maybe make sure that I have the right one, so that we don't run into this problem again. Final with lagging. So just say no. I think that's probably it. A posed high. Yep. Let's try that. In fact, you know what? If I want to make sure, I know this is kind of weird, but if you ever want to make sure that a mesh is like the right way that you thought it was, or if it's the correct file, you could always view FBXs inside of Windows. So let me just check. Alright, let me see. Anti-aliasing I'll turn on, probably 8x8. Actually, you know what? 4x4 should be fine. This is just the subsampling of aliasing and the level of, I believe, for anti-aliasing. Match always and high-low, I'll leave that just fine. And I believe also you can come under here the same way and use your world space normal, or either no ID, sorry. With ID, there's a spot in here where you could bake on your color information. You can actually select it. I'm trying to remember what the setting was. Average normal is good. Color ID. Okay, so here we go. ID Baker parameters. This color source here, I'm going to use the colors that were originally in the file, and it's because I want to use the vertex color rather than the material ID or the material color. I'm going to select vertex color, right? And that way, everything that I poly painted in it'll bake inside of a color map for me, right? Because I'm not using it for color IDs. I want to use it straight up as the color, base color, pre-baked base color, right? Okay, and then I bake. Hope this was the right mesh. I'll know in a few seconds. Apologies for that. Nope, yep, I think that was right. And then as you can see, it will go through each and bake it out. So normal, world space normal, material ID, it'll do the ambient occlusion, curvature, position, and thickness all in one go. And if I look under the textures, or actually, sorry, project, it should be all of the bake. I actually think I grabbed another one that was not quite right, because the ambient occlusion should be much more white than that. Strange. However, and it should have more normal information. So I'm just going to give you this one as an example. And actually, you know what I'll do is we'll do this. If I add resources, I can go and actually grab maps just to show from the original bake. It should be like this, and this, and let's see, probably a few more down there at the bottom. Position, and I believe that's thickness, and world space normal, and we'll open those up, and we have to define these all. So I'm going to give these a texture definition. Right, and I can use the previous bake now in this bake, so I can add them. I'm going to add them to probably project, and then import. And now that I have them in, I'm going to place them on the model. So from the baked stuff from before, there's a few of these that didn't work out, so I'm just going to replace everything. Hypothetically, we'll say, yes, it baked out and baked out right. So every once in a while, sometimes if I screw something up, I think I yet again picked a different mesh, and what it's doing is it baked out some of the information, but some of the other maps, like the ambient occlusion, maybe something is off or misaligned. I know I had to go through and do a couple of fixes to get it to bake right, but it's sort of like a rinse and repeat, process to get a nice bake with the minimal amount of errors baked in. So for this, I'm just going to take the maps that I had baked out before and place them in Substance, and even then you can still add more materials. For example, a lot of the work that I did inside of here was add like emissives for like some of the little greeble parts, like on the skull and on the skin. But if I take this now and I just drop it on probably like the color space, actually not that one yet, we'll take the normal map. And as you can see from the normal map, now all of the high detail that we had is now placed on the model again, right? And so I can take curvature and add that. We can take world space and we'll put that there. Let's see. World space normal. Yep. And we'll grab thickness, place it there. And you can see every time I add one of the maps, the texture of the model and the viewport becomes a little bit more refined, because all of these maps are being projected onto the model, right? Only I'm going to hold out on the base color. I'm going to put that actually on a fill layer, right? So what I've used is the curvature, normal, the position gradient as well. We need to plug that one in. There we go. And so everything's nice and smoothed out. All we need is our color. So I'm going to make a nice little fill layer here, and it's going to use just this for now, just color. And I can take this color map baked from what was the Vertex color setting that I showed you and just drop it on base color. And there it goes. And now I can add, other materials or smart materials if I wanted to. I used it for a lot of decal stamping post having used Spotlight and Zbrush, and did a few decals on the body, the cyber body, like on the arms. I think there are a few decals. Emissives also that were placed here. To do emissives just really quick, it's pretty easy, just to do those little cyberpunky details. You can just add like a fill layer, and I believe give it a color. We'll say like red or something like that, and then you have to add it here. Emissive, there we go. And then that emissive fill I believe you just brush it on. You could probably add a black mask, and then just wherever you brush, that spot would be an emissive. So I just take off the alpha, and then, you know, it'll be in the map, and then I save out the exported map, and it would be a complete emissive map, right? Kind of like what you see here in Marmoset. Little points on the forehead and the back there. Like here, I'll take this one and turn it. It just makes for a nice little detail. And then when you come to Marmoset, all of those maps that were exported, so like let's say for example I took all of this as is right now, and I wanted to get both the mesh out, I would export the mesh, probably as either an FBX or OBJ, and then I would come over to the textures, and it's pretty easy to do, but just select a directory for yourself where you want to save the textures. And then for me, I'm actually using a lot of stuff in Unreal, and so I'm using the Unreal 4 packed setting, but you can also alter your own setting inside of Substance to get, you know, just like a basic PBR bake, and then you can add certain maps extra that you need to bake out. So it's really handy as a baker, but this is where I end up taking a lot of ZBrush sculpts and then texturing up in this way and then coming back. Also additionally using Quixel's mixer and also Quixel, the older Quixel suite, both that I still use. So let's say, for example, I'm going to move right along from texturing just a little bit and talk about how I used Mixer, right? So I think I have a hold of my low, proper low model. So let's just flip over. I want to go to Chrome. Open up a new Chrome window. It'll be great. Here we go. And then I'm going to go over to Mixamo. And I would, of course, you know, if you have some proper topology in your models, or if you Z-remeshed and optimized a model, and then did all of the baking procedures to get a high and do a comparison bake. Let's say you come over to Substance and you bake it, and then you have that source low mesh, you know, with either an A pose or a T pose. You can go to someplace like Mixamo, which is pretty much a service that's provided under your Adobe Creative account if you should have one. And let's see, I'll log in. Oop. Wait, hey, go back. Okay, yeah. Here we go. Okay. So this is Mixamo, and what you're looking at here are you know, various little mocap datas that have been applied to a basic mannequin. You can download just the mannequin itself if you choose one and didn't have a model loaded. I have uploaded this model before, but I'm just going to go through the motions again to try and put one into Mixamo. So first off, I'm going to hit upload character, and I'm going to go and I'm going to grab the mesh itself. So let's see. Going here. Yep. Yep. And there we go. Alright, and let's see. In the Substance Bake folder had the actual finished flats, and in there had the actual mesh. Low. Here we go. So I'll choose that one. It'll upload. I think on this base mesh I hadn't put the leggings on yet, but getting there. Position maps, actually, I'm not actually sure what they do. They're one of the procedural maps I think that probably fixes the RGB lighting of an object. Usually a lot of texture maps are like the... You know what? Let's just make this simple. We'll go and we'll find out together. and give ourselves a proper explanation of what it is. That would be suitable, yeah? What is position? I believe it helps out with the depth, but I just want to make sure. Positioning refers to the perception of a product in the minds of... no, that is not it. Sorry. Beep, 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 beep. Position. This is nothing that has anything to do with 3D. You know what? Alright. The position map from a mesh baker computes the location of the high poly mesh geometry and save into a texture. It is similar to the base position baker, but can produce more accurate results. So there you have it. Actually, I should post this here. Copy it. This would probably give you a better explanation than I. For Zofo 264, if you could see that one in the chat. Yeah. Just one of, like, I guess it's probably like about 5 maps that I try to bake out, but it just probably helps out with the depth, the perception of depth on the model and the geo. There's usually like that plus thickness, and then normal. Curvature is for all of the light information that hits the edges, so like that's where you get a lot of your edge wear, like the masking of the edges. You usually use as a AO and curvature, I believe. And so like if it has a tightness to it, that edge wear can either be thinner or more broad from the corner. Hope that helps. But let's bring that panel back. So there we go, it's uploaded. See, I went and got the wrong one again. I don't know how it keeps doing this. Hold on a second. Let's go back. Let's go back. I'm gonna grab this again. This cannot be right. This. This. And this. Sorry. This model I've actually baked twice, and so it's actually kind of confusing. I need to clean up the directory for it. I did a pre-bake of just the model with no details unsculpted, and it's named similarly, so I think I keep grabbing the wrong mesh. Sorry about that. But let's grab the right stuff this time. So, down. Final authority. I'll use this one. This is the right deal. I think I got a good feeling about this. We're gonna open it up. It's just gonna be magic. Takes a second to upload every once in a while, depending on resolution as well. Like if your poly count is pretty high, it might not have the best of time, but usually like a medium to low mesh, it will actually work with pretty well. And then also, I will say this, for those that have been watching certain software like Instalod, where you bake out sort of really highly decimated models into like ridiculous low models or LOD models. You can bring some of those LOD models into Mixamo, for a character rig. It's amazing, but it'll actually work. Alright, looks like it's just almost done. About to take a second here. It'll probably load up. There we go. And it's the right model. Awesome. Alright, so there we go. So I suppose at this point, if you wanted, while you're loading it, if you needed to turn your model on its axis or anything like that and get it going, you could. Mine is face forwarding with slightly the arms apart. Legs are apart, but they could be a little bit wider, but they're pretty close. The ankles are pretty close together. But what I'm going to do now is probably move to the next page where I'm going to set markers. And it's actually just totally uploaded to Miximo's server, but it's not for going to be shared. Basically, it's just you're uploading your model, and then you're going to download FBXs of this once we place motion onto it. But it needs sort of a base of markers to probably run its algorithm and actually produce a rig. So for all intensive auto rigging purposes, let's place one on the chin right there, and we'll do some for the wrists right about there. Try to place it properly so that the rig doesn't come out too gimpy. It looks weird every once in a while if it's out of place. So elbows, place right around there, I think. Elbows should be under there. The knees, right about there. And the groin. So I'll do this just above, right about there, I suppose. And I'll hit next. Just here at the bottom, yes, use symmetry. This pretty much by default, this will be checked. Skeleton LOD, I'm just using the standard skeleton 65. But you could set it for chain fingers that are 3 chain fingers or 2 chain fingers, like if you have a creature or something, or no finger at all. I'm going to use a standard skeleton, right? And go next. I would imagine, and I haven't played with this, but I would imagine also for those of you who don't want to go through the whole process, but you just want to quickly decimate it, see how it looks in Engine in Unreal, you could probably decimate it and based off of polygroups actually create color IDs and also UV unwrap it and probably make the same work. It just depends on how the topology is optimized, I suppose, but if it's light enough, you could probably just, save it with the normal smooth, kick it over, do the same thing, and put it into Miximo and make it actually move. It's kind of weird. Without proper weight painting, though, some areas are bound to look a little crazy, depending on what the movement in the animation is. So this takes about 2 minutes every once in a while, maybe a minute and a half. Sorry that it takes just a moment, but it has to go through the motions. And there we go. Processed and uploaded. And there you can see it's auto-rigged it, and it's already moving. So we'll hit next. Oh wow, that's weird. Not sure exactly how that happened. Oh, it's jumping. Suppose that's why. So if one of the first things that I do when I come into Miximo, before I really get into doing a bunch of animations is, because it's auto-rigged this, one of the first things that I want to do is probably grab a T-pose. And you can search for one here on Miximo by just entering T-pose. And then here, there's a character T-pose. And then I will save this one right away. And I do this because if I don't, I would have to go through the same process of setting up the markers next time I come around, or let's say I'm doing something for Unreal and I don't have enough character actions to match that animation. I can come back and just upload the T-pose that I download, and I can use this rig all over again and add new custom animations to it. There's also some other animation sources that you can use. I believe, like if you use the Rococo suits, I believe there's a bit of software for that you can use with a library of mocaps. Maybe even do some mocap blending, I think. I'm not exactly sure, but there are other sources of mocap data out there besides Miximo. But pretty much this is how I do it using Miximo, because I use Adobe stuff, so it's pretty handy. And all of these are very much made to go inside of Unreal. Now, some of the things that you would look at in this model that may need to be fixed. I mentioned before, but some of the weight paints that are in and around the groin area. and also under the wing here, under the arm. Maybe some of these polys need to be relaxed and weighted, so that way we don't get the weird bend here where she's got the huge the huge muscles there under the arm reaching into the back. It does look a little bit odd, but once we weight it, it would probably even out a little bit, and we can position it back so that we can get the arm to deform properly, right? And that, even after the rig, I can probably paint it after the fact, because it does look a little odd where it stretches here. It looks a little bit more normal, and it's a little bumpier and uneven here on the shoulder. So, is this TOS? Actually, it's Mixamo, right? And I took the ZBrush sculpted low that has already been baked out, but none of the bake maps have been applied here in Mixamo. I'm just using this for the mesh and for the rig, right? It's time to download and